Hi, this is David Bennett with the North Carolina Maritime Museum System, and today we're continuing our multi-part series entitled North Carolina Fisheries Incorporated and the Great Depression. And this is part 3, Initial Structure and Function. Um, Last time I said that we were going to cover the first year of the co-op. However, I decided rather to do the initial structure and function because I think that would make a little bit more sense if we spent more time talking about that before we jump too much into the history of the organization. So, as I mentioned last time, North Carolina Fisheries Incorporated uh, uh, began operation on October 7th, 1935, with 400 members and 4 different locations. And the co op, the way it worked was that fishermen would go out, catch their fish, bring it back to one of the sites, and then they would be paid the prevailing market price for their catch up front. The catch would then be processed, marketed, and distributed, and then whatever profits were then later on gained from that, from the marketing of the fish, were then later on just the net profits would be distributed to the members based on proportion of catch. So the more you catch, the more the net profit you'd be eligible to receive. Um, and if there was a surplus of fish, it'd be frozen, stored, and marketed when the prices were better for the fish, so the fishermen could get a better um, price for their fish. Um, and the co-op also had some other programs, such as a loan program that helped fishermen purchase the gear they needed to do their job. Morehead City was the headquarters. They had a quick freezing plant with an 800,000 pound cold storage capacity. There's an ice plant that could produce 10,000 pounds of ice per day. And there's also facilities for preparing fish in different ways, such as filleting, pan dressing, canning, salting, smoking. And there's also experimental seafood lab as well. The Southport plant had cold storage and a cannery. The Belhaven plant had cold storage and a fillet room. And the Manio plant had a cold storage and fillet room as well. And here's a help wanted ad for the Manio plant describing the different capabilities of that plant. Overseeing this whole operation was John Sikes, president and general manager of the North Carolina Fisheries Incorporated. He had a background in newspapers and public relations. He ran public relations for Governor Ehringhouse's election campaign, and he was also the director of public relations for the North Carolina Emergency Relief Administration, which had become defunct by the time uh, he came along with the fisheries, and he was responsible for overseeing the plants as well as sales and marketing of the seafood products. He was also on the board of directors for the North Carolina Self Help Corporation, which was the parent company of the North Carolina Fisheries Incorporated. They received the federal grants and loans and dispersed them to the fisheries in the form of loans, and they also served as an advisory role, and they helped oversee the business management of the co-op. Then there's Mrs. Annie O'Berry, who she was on the board of directors of both the North Carolina Fisheries Incorporated and the North Carolina Self Help Corporation, and she was instrumental in helping John Sikes oversee the fisheries. He often relied on her for her wisdom and the body of knowledge that she had just accumulated, having administered other relief programs, and he and others leaned heavily on her expertise. The requirements for becoming a member with the co-op was that you had to be um, a commercial fisherman, a full-time commercial fisherman, and that's where your primary source of income had to come from fishing. And you had to agree to the terms and conditions of membership, and you had to pay an annual fee of $10 a year. That could be in the form of cash, services rendered to the co-op, or it could be in the form of commodities, so fish, oysters, clams, that sort of thing. And here's a blank membership card. And here's a reverse side that has the terms of membership, which is basically outlining that fishermen would be paid the prevailing market price for their seafood products, and that if the North Carolina Fisheries couldn't take on their catch, then they could go to other dealers and sell their fish there. Um, but it's primarily on the fishermen to check in with the fisheries first to see if that could be done. And then there's also this profit sharing that I mentioned earlier. And they started out with 30 chapters, and these are groups of members across eastern North Carolina. And the fisheries would send trucks or run boats out to these different chapters to get their fish and take them back to the different plants to have them processed and marketed. One of the most productive and noteworthy of the chapters was the Salter Path chapter, which is in Carteret County on Bogue Banks, not far from Morehead City. And those fishermen specialized in going after sea mullet with small boats and seines from the beach. And they're highly productive and very loyal to the North Carolina Fisheries Incorporated. Then there's this fisherman loan program that I'd mentioned earlier, where fishermen could apply for credit through the co-op to get gear or fuel or repair a boat so they can do their job. But there's also an interesting aspect to this program as well. And it's for the wives and families of fishermen, particularly the ones on welfare, where these wives could apply to the co-op for work, and they'd be put to work tying nets, constructing nets, which would then be sold to fishermen who were part of the co-op. And that's just sort of an interesting aspect. Later on, the WPA took over that net construction program. So the products that they primarily marketed were fillets, frozen fillets, sea snack, and Carolina Coast fillet. Carolina Coast fillet was by far the most popular and most widely marketed of the two products. Then there's also fish cakes. There's also frozen whole fish, fish in the round, and frozen shrimp cocktails as well, that could either come in small packages or larger family size packages that included cocktail sauce. Then there are the experimental products. Um, these are more your added value seafood products, things that you would find today in the frozen section of your local grocery store. Things like deviled crab or crab gumbo, or even clam chowder, prepared seafood meals. There's also these improved fish processing methods and methods of handling fish. They were emulating what was going on in New England in terms of preparing and packaging fish. And what the fisheries was looking to do was to cut out the middlemen, to not go through wholesale dealers. Ideally, what they wanted to do was prepare and package their fish and other seafood products to go straight into the grocery stores. And this really wasn't being done in North Carolina at the time, and this required all sorts of machinery that was relatively new to most people in the fish handling communities in eastern North Carolina. So people from up north had to train the locals on this equipment. The basic idea behind their marketing and distribution was they're trying to reach into markets in North Carolina's interior that had never been reached before, particularly in the western part of the state. Um, Things like grocery stores and fresh meat markets. Uh, Grocery stores was a relatively new thing at the time, um, but however, they really take off after World War II. In order to get their seafood products out to these markets, they're using the railroad as well as a fleet of trucks. And they told the other wholesale fish distributors that they try not to compete with them in these markets. That's why they're trying to find these new untouched markets. And so here's an image that sort of describes what they're attempting. And the red star is Morehead City, which was the headquarters, but also the main distribution center for the North Carolina Fisheries Incorporated seafood product. They put them, this is a railroad map, by the way, they put them um, on the railroad in Morehead City and ship them to Statesville, which is indicated by the red circle. And then from Statesville, they put the seafood products on trucks and send them out to places like Winston-Salem, Greensboro, Charlotte, and possibly even as far west as Asheville. But that's sort of the basic idea of what they're trying to attempt. And so next time we're going to have go over the first year of operation, which was a rough start, and we'll talk about the different challenges they faced.